let's move on to Mansour Fahimi from Ipsos. He's the last presenter of this session, and then we will open the floor to questions.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining this short presentation on hybrid sampling. I should mention immediately that while there are no standard definitions for hybrid sampling, the focus of this presentation is on samples that have some kind of compromised representation. As other speakers have already mentioned, the importance of representation. So these could be samples that start probabilistically, but suffer serious differential non-response, which could be most of the surveys that are conducted out there these days, or samples that start in a non-probabilistic way, or even when you take various sample types and mix them together and have an amalgamation, which again has compromised representation. I'm going to share you some highlights from a decade-long research that we have been conducting, and a long list of talented people have been supporting me in that research, including two of the presenters at this conference, Francis Barlas and Randall Thomas. Very quickly, the presentation, I'll start with what I like to call the big picture. I'll talk about the traditional inferential paradigm, what has changed, the implication of the change, some of the solutions that we can consider, and a few takeaways. So the big picture, as far as I'm concerned, is this good old total survey error model that indicates that surveys are multifaceted endeavors, and we really need to have a holistic view. Because if attention is not paid to all components of the survey, weak links are generated and they compromise the integrity of the resulting data. So we have to focus on sampling, on instrumentation, on data processing, reporting, and analysis. The inferential paradigm that we have all learned in an introductory survey sampling courses is that if there is a universe, a known universe, and from it we take a probability-based sample, and we are lucky enough that everybody responds, then through magic of weighting, we can produce inferences, measurable inferences about the target population. Of course, this is only a textbook reality, and in practice, it never happens. And a major change that we have been dealing with is the non-response. I'm sharing the median rates of response from BRFSS, which is the largest RDD survey for the CDC. I'm using this only because I had access to this data, nothing specific about the BRFSS. The point that is important here is, again, the declining rate of response, which is not unique to telephone surveys, to surveys that are conducted in the US. It's a global problem. So what are some of the impacts of this change? The fact that surveys, either through non-response or through sampling, end up with respondents that are not representative of their target population, means that if you take your respondents and apply basic or traditional geodemographic weighting, you're not going to take away all of the misalignments and biases. This is a chart that shows if you take a sample that has representational issues and go take it through basic geodemographic weighting, there are a whole bunch of measures, weighted estimates, that is, from that survey that are not going to align with external benchmarks. So observations of this nature encouraged practitioners to look into better ways that we can weight our data. Two of my good friends, Charles DeSogra and Curtis Cobb, in 2011 suggested that when you have a sample with compromised representation, particularly those that come from online panels, need to be adjusted beyond geodemographics with respect to some of the attitudinal and behavioral attributes. And they suggested these items to be added in the weighting process. However, when you look at these attributes, they are highly correlated, meaning that they are basically tapping into the same underlying higher propensity for being an early adopter when you work with samples with compromised representation, again, particularly those that come from online opt-in panels. So we started with this excellent beginning, and considered what other ways we can make adjustments. How can we produce a multivariate calibration adjustment? Recognizing that respondents that come from compromised samples could be having misalignments with respect to a whole bunch of other characteristics: social engagement, self-importance, shopping habits, happiness and security, politics, community activities, altruism, survey participation, usage of social media, so on and so forth. So knowing that these are some of the differences between the general population and respondents who come from opt-in panels or samples with compromised representation, even when they are weighted geodemographically, we decided to cherry pick and find out which one of these items or measures we can add to our calibration process, recognizing that there has to be parsimony, right? We can't make all these adjustments, because the more adjustments are added, while they reduce bias, they increase variance. So we went through a series of analytical procedures, stepwise regression, classification methods to identify which one of these items we should be adding to the list of calibration items. And we ended up with my friends, again, Francis and Thomas and Randall, with a bunch of models, and we finally netted out on these 5 items. And we have seen that using these additional adjustment variables as part of calibration improves the external validity of data that comes from samples with compromised representation. We are talking about general population surveys. And then recently we extended that work and focused on ways that we can improve representation of surveys that focus on teens and young adults, because for these individuals, some of these old calibration items are not really differentiators. And through a series of examinations, we found that for younger adults, items that are more suitable for calibration are those that focus on housing type, financial situation, whether the teen lives with the parent or not, interest in influencing, being an influencer on social media, frequency of relocation, and items of this sort. So very quickly summarizing, the world is changing, obviously. It's a cliche, but our traditional methods are having issues, traditional sampling methods, due to cost, coverage, time. And on the other hand, alternative methods, hybrid methods of sampling are becoming more popular and more effective. I'd like to make a distinction between researchers who are on the commercial side, the so-called market researchers. They have always been critical of us survey researchers, saying that survey research methods are too slow and costly, and they cannot capture all the nuances that are important, such as point of sales data. On the other hand, us researchers, perhaps those who are more on the traditional side, are a little slow to the process. They think that only probability samples have inferential integrity, and that market research methods are beneath us. But again, there are new realities that we have to deal with in the digital age. Business as usual doesn't work. Perfect coverage, high response rates are gone. Days of lengthy surveys are over, and alternative methods are here to stay. So perhaps we should be focusing on what I would like to call pragmatic rigor by respecting the strength of traditional methods. We are not throwing out the baby with the bathwater, but at the same time appreciating the potential gains of alternative methods while dealing with their shortfalls in a transparent manner, embracing parsimonious instrumentation. Again, days of long surveys are over, recognizing the need for pragmatic sampling and more aggressive weighting and calibration adjustments. As samples encounter higher rates of non-response, more aggressive weighting is going to be needed. And finally, relying on analytical methods that are proper and are responsive to the issues that I have mentioned. And to finish, perhaps on a lighter note, this is my depiction of our friends on the commercial side. Market researchers are very fast and agile. Us researchers are, while very methodical, but perhaps a little too slow, but we are forced to become faster and modernizing, therefore. And I am anxious to see what the future has in it for us. But times are changing and we need to change. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mansour.